firstly, we don't break out the granular data, but delivery is a large part of our off-premise business, as we call it. And the off-premise business is roughly around 42 to 45% of sales. We are only 400 odd restaurants, right? If you look at the population we serve, as GDP per capita keeps growing, in the medium term, we've already said that, we see 1,000 restaurants being a reality.
What do you think of the evolution of the consumer in Tier 2, Tier 3?
So Tier 2, Tier 3 is where a lot of brands haven't gone first because obviously there are apprehensions in terms of whether unit economics would make sense. 90% plus, I would say, of our menu is local. And we've done that obviously to relate a lot more to the Indian consumers over the last 30 years. And today I'd say we're a very well-entrenched brand in terms of being truly Indian.
I'm in conversation today with Akshay Jatia, a fourth-generation entrepreneur and a second-generation QSR entrepreneur. Akshay is the CEO of Westlife Foodworld, which has been selling McDonald's in India since it opened up here in 1996. In this conversation, he talks to me about QSR and McD in India and how he sees both shaping up in the next few years. It's Tuesday, the 25th of March. I'm your host, Anirban Chowdhury, and this is the Morning Brief. Akshay, very warm welcome to this very special corner office conversation on the Morning Brief.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Absolute pleasure, Akshay. Tell me something. Let's start with your family has been part of this for very, very long. So I'm sure your association with McDonald's goes into your childhood much deeper than it would for any of us, which would be visiting restaurants and having a chicken McGrill or whatever. It would be part of dinner table conversations, very deep ones. What was your association with McDonald's when you were a child, and sort of how did it sort of evolve from there?
So definitely, obviously, I was exposed to it a lot sooner than most people. But to be very honest, I really didn't know what my parents did till I was probably, 8 or 10 years old. I think we brought McDonald's into the country in 1996. And obviously, the journey has been super exciting for them. And then me, once I joined the business.
How old were you?
When they brought McDonald's to the country, I was around 5 years old. And my mom also, as well as my dad, both worked in the business from pretty much the inception. Close to a few years ago is when they kind of handed it over to me. So it's been super interesting, exciting from obviously the feelings of, being exposed to McDonald's as a young kid. And then, as a older teenager, when I was very motivated to start working in the family business to create all the value that I saw. Today, where I have this great platform that I can work on and drive the next phase of growth, which is to make this into a large business as well as a business that adds value, to both the external world as well as to the family and the employees.
When was it that you sort of joined the company? Which year was it?
So it was at the end of 2014, beginning of 2015.
Yeah.
And the first role actually, which was precondition my parents gave me, was to work in the restaurants and learn operations from ground up. So I spent almost 10 months doing that. And obviously as a 22-year-old, I kind of was really disheartened that, I had to go to a physical restaurant every day versus doing, sexy work in the office as we all thought it was back then.
Yeah.
But today when I look back, it was probably one of the most valuable experiences because I'm still able to relate to a lot of the nuts and bolts that I see today.
How would you say 2014 to now, how would you say the QSR industry has changed in India? What are the three ways?
So huge change, I would say, and only for the better. Back then, even though it was still, almost 20 years post McDonald's opening its first outlet in India, the industry was still quite nascent. Everyone still viewed Western fast food as a foreign food form. especially burgers. In fact, pizza was more relatable back then because it's bread and cheese and kind of resembles like an Indian roti in some ways. So people could relate to that a lot more. And for us, I think building brand relevance was one of the key tasks. And I would say that number one, the relevance factor has definitely improved dramatically for the brand as well as QSR. COVID played a huge role in accelerating the shift of preference towards organized food, but digital actually and digital sales back then were almost a negligible part of the business. And in fact, my first project after working in the restaurants was driving our delivery business, which was a mix of digital and kind of phone ordering. But one of my biggest struggles and also successes was digitizing this whole experience, creating a back-end tech platform, truly creating a digital marketing mindset for our organization. And it was not easy. In fact, I faced a lot of struggles in the early days convincing the organization that this was a must have. Today, that's not the case. Today, while it's still something that we can improve on and make it a larger part of our growth story, having that conversation is not very hard. And getting the organization behind it is actually a very easy job to do. So that
McDonald's has its own delivery app, right?
yeah. So we have our own McDelivery application. We also have a McDonald's application, which is more of a engagement application versus the former, which is more of a e-commerce application. And we also have our self-ordering kiosks at the restaurants, as you may have seen.
Which have done really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And customers have really gravitated towards that form of ordering.
Yes.
And our entire restaurant looks more appealing to your new millennial or Gen.
Oh yes, including my son actually. I was quite fascinated with the self-ordering thing, that he could choose, etc.
I'm very glad to hear that because he's the exact target customer
Yeah.
that we're looking to satisfy.
Also, but how are your apps doing, in the sense what percentage of deliveries or sales would be your own apps? Because mostly it's the marketplace apps are very big, right? The aggregators like Zomato, etc. So what's the point of having a McD app which would...
That's a great question, actually. Firstly, we don't break out the granular data, but delivery is a large part of our off-premise business, as we call it, and the off-premise business is roughly around 42 to 45% of sales. So delivery, is a substantial part of the business and a fast-growing part of the business. Within that, we obviously have our relationships with the aggregators, and we have our own platform, as I discussed. Our own platform is extremely important, and actually it's something that I'm very particular about because it solves for two things, and two very important things. One is that it allows us to stay directly connected to our customers, which in today's day and age you can't not be, because customers like your son, for example, would be most likely present on the digital ecosystem and not on the offline ecosystem. So not having a brand presence or a way to interact with him would be a big miss for an organization that's looking at growing for the next 10, 20 years. You have to be able to connect with these type of customers and understand their needs and then cater to their needs through those platforms. And number two, obviously, it's a way of managing. It's kind of building on the first, enterprise risk, because you can't be reliant on only third party partners to drive a large part of your business, right? You also need to have predictability in your hands.
Right.
And control in your hands. So I think that these two things are obviously our key drivers. But at the same time, even in the larger ecosystem, having tech platforms, being a tech enabled business is extremely relevant for growth.
Right, right. Tell me something. Globally, the McDonald's story has been a little bleak, right? I mean, last year we saw global sales declining, I think, for the first time in 3 years. The CEO has made several sort of comments to that effect. There have been newspaper articles, etc., which have said McDonald's, what will it do to win back the trust? The story in India is obviously very, very different. You see demand growing. How have you managed that? And what sort of different challenges has that brought to you in the last, say, 2, 3 years?
India has its own story, which is that of growing consumerism, high growth, a very young population. So we've been able to obviously capitalize on those demographics and those trends, because that's the whole purpose of this multi-country model, right? And having a local partner like us driving the business, which is that we can capitalize on these trends and demographics to take advantage of this endless runway for growth, as I call it, because we are only 400 odd restaurants, right? If you look at the population we serve, as GDP per capita keeps growing, in the medium term, we've already said that, we see 1,000 restaurants being a reality. In the near term, as per our Vision 2027, we've already laid out a path to 600 odd restaurants. So
1,000 till when?
1,000 is more medium term. So I would say, 2030 and beyond, give or take a few years, is, where we could easily kind of breach that mark. So I think that by identifying these trends, capitalizing on them, as I said, we are very well poised for growth, which is why we are growing quite fast in India. And as consumerism continues to improve, which our government is doing a lot of work to improve, I think we'll be there to take advantage of it.
What do you think of the evolution of the consumer in tier 2, tier 3, and sort of how does your story sort of grow in those segments when you make that trip from, or the journey from 400 to 600 to 1,000?
So that's a great question, because it's the perfect add-on, right? In terms of, again, why is India growing versus the global ecosystem, which is a little more volatile currently. So I think India as a country, again, is very young, and we have a lot of aspirationality, and we have a lot of, wealth distribution across different types of cities. So tier 2, tier 3 is where a lot of brands haven't gone first, because obviously there are apprehensions in terms of whether unit economics would make sense, are actually filled with a lot of individuals who've done very well and have high aspiration and want to go out, want to spend money, and especially experience brands like ours, which stand for a unique or a foreign experience while being truly Indian. So I think that these cities pose a very unique challenge for us, where we need to continue to stay relevant, but also we can penetrate. And that's what we've done. In fact, our tier 2, tier 3 cities are performing quite well. There are some that even outpace the metros in terms of growth. So again, I don't have that number at the top of my head in terms of, percentage, but we are in, I would say almost 60 plus cities. And today we are, and this is, physical outlets, 3,000 plus square foot, all largely making money. And we are looking at expanding further in tier 2, tier 3s. In fact, our expansion plans moving forward account for a good opportunity in these tier 2, tier 3s. Like, there are small towns like Bharuch in Gujarat, others in central India like Bhilai and Bilaspur, where these restaurants drive more volumes than most brands and even some of our stores in metro cities.
Great. So is there a sort of quantifier you can give me as to what percentage of your future growth would come from tier 2, tier 3 in terms of your expansion as well as your revenue? Anything that you can give me?
Sure. So, I mean, we did break it down again when we gave out a large host of data, but it is subject to revision year on year. But we did say that, close to around 20 to 30% of our new outlets will be in these tier 2, tier 3s. That being said, we also see a large opportunity in the south, where, we have a large number of outlets, but, our stronghold has typically been the west. We enter the south a little later. The customer has different preferences. It's a very regional region, even within the south, as a lot of people say, there are many countries. So there we have a larger opportunity to penetrate, because as we've been building brand relevance, we've been making it easier to build restaurants, because our unit economics only get better.
Yeah.
So, that's our plan moving forward.
Got it. Okay. So just on your sort of DNA, right? One of the reasons why McDonald's succeeded in India is because it Indianized the burger without completely Indianizing it. So it was not a vada pav, and it was not what you get in McDonald's, say, New York or whatever. But the burger itself has evolved, and so has the consumer. So now the consumer is much more ready for global products, and you have much more competition as well. Good Flipping Burgers, etc. The juicier, meatier burgers are flooding the market. What's stopping, two-pronged question, what's stopping McDonald's from bringing more global products to India, and what do you think of competition?
So, that's interesting because, 90% plus, I would say, of our menu is local. And we've done that obviously to relate a lot more to the Indian consumers over the last 30 years. And today, I'd say we're a very well entrenched brand in terms of being truly Indian, but at the same time, obviously selling Western fast food. But, that being said, most recently in November, we launched a new platform, which we call McCrispy. And actually, that's a global platform. And the only uniqueness to that is we have a veg McCrispy, which they don't have globally. And I think you'll continue to see a lot of innovation at our end. Even in the coming year, we have a bunch of promotions planned, which I'm very excited about. I love eating burgers. So whenever I see all these presentations and plans, I get hungry and then I'm excited for the next quarter. So that's one in terms of how we look at products and innovation. And number two, in terms of competition, right? I think competition is great. And again, in this podcast that I was listening to, they felt the same because you're creating a market and you can only do that when there are multiple people investing, right? You've seen that across many different industries.
Sure.
And I think it only makes our opportunity larger because people are getting more and more familiar with Western fast food or burgers in this context. And we are leaders in terms of selling burgers by far. And no, I mean, I'm also someone who's tried a bunch of these burger competitors that we have, and I really like their products. Whether it's Good Flipping, whether it's I think I've had Louis Burger also in the past. Globally, I enjoy eating Chick-fil-A as well. But I think that eventually, when you travel near and far, when you are looking for a predictable experience, and I have a lot of people telling me this recently, and I'm very happy to hear that even when they travel out of, say, Mumbai airport, they know there's a McDonald's there.
Yes.
So they know what they're going to get. And they're actually excited that, now before traveling, we can eat something that we can, resonate with. We know what to expect afterwards also. And we really enjoy it. So eventually you'll keep coming back to McDonald's. That's the point I was getting to.
Right. Akshay, tell me about McCafe. It's obviously done well. Is there a sort of individual different plan that you have for this brand as to sort of a different growth plan or a trajectory that you have in mind for this? Because obviously it's done well, like you said. Coffee has really caught on in the last few years, and it's also sort of coterminous with, although I'm not saying this is the reason for your success, but coterminous with the shrinkage or the fall of several Indian brands. Cafe Coffee Day we all know about. Starbucks, it's not done as well as the company had envisaged it doing in India. So obviously that has also contributed. So is there something in your mind for McCafe individually also going forward?
So no, great question. I think, I get this a lot, but the beauty of McCafe is that it's a part of brand McDonald's. It's actually a competitive advantage for us because it doesn't take too much to set up. Obviously we allocate space to it, but today now, real estate has become a lot easier for us, having opened, 400 plus outlets. Our task now, however, is to offer this at scale. So we want to make it a mass beverage. That's the beauty of our brand versus, a lot of these other newer brands that are coming up. Some of them are a little more niche. Some of them are trying to do what, Cafe Coffee Day couldn't do eventually. But I think we've already done that and we're on a very good path to doing that better. Your brother Ayush runs Sinona, which is becoming very, very popular. Do you guys discuss burgers and what kind of conversations do you? So at home, we discuss all types of food because all of us love food, starting from my dad, my brother, and me. My mom likes food, but not as much as us. So we definitely have a lot of discussions on strategic elements of the businesses that we run. The idea is obviously to leverage the wealth of experience and knowledge, my parents have. But, we have very independent styles of operating. I think he's done a great job and very excited for him and, what Sinona's holds for the future. I think that, we have a lot of great discussions, and considering that both of us are young, ambitious, and very motivated and high energy, I think that, I'm excited for what the future holds.
Right. Jack Welch is someone who inspires your father a lot. Who would you count as, which business icon would you count as your inspiration?
So that's a very hard question because, I was asked this recently as well. And obviously, I have a lot of exposure to Jack Welch because in the early days, my dad would keep telling me to read his books. And I am not a very big reader of books. I read a lot of, magazines and newspapers. But, he is someone who I've learned from because of my dad. But if I have to talk about myself, there's no one leader actually or business icon that I kind of get an inspiration from. It's something I learned from my dad, which is listen to everyone and then, do what you feel is the best in your own way. So that's what I do. I accumulate as much as I can in terms of knowledge, whether it's across publications, whether it's across biographies and autobiographies. Obviously, one of the most talked about leaders today in the world is Elon Musk, and very controversial figure. But I would say, parts of the things that he does that inspire me is his ability to build businesses, his abilities to challenge first principles thinking. So I take that from him. Then if I look at other leaders like the NVIDIA CEO or Tim Cook, there's so much to learn from what they have created. One from scratch, the second, from taking a platform to the heights that it's reached today. And also in the Indian context, right? There are so many leaders who've done such a fantastic job to make our economy what it is today. Even in the retail space or the telecom space, I think Bharti Airtel is a business that's done extremely well, and I have a mentor who is very close to them, and I learned so much from her. So I think that's what's given me success.
Akshay, thank you so much for joining us on the Morning Brief.
No, great. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the questions and hoping to do this again.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Great.
That's it for today. You were listening to this episode on the Morning Brief. It was produced by Surohini Jain and Vinay Joshi, sound designed by Amrit Reggie and Rajas Naik. A new episode of the Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. Keep listening.